Hey there, welcome back. On today's episode, we're diving into the world of branding and business with Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. Get ready for some insights on owning your brand's identity, entrepreneurial journeys, and how to make meaningful connections in the B2B world. Let's get started.
Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Welcome to Business as Unusual. I'm here today with Eric Holtzclaw, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he's up to in the world. Do you want to let people know a little bit about who you are and what your business is?
Yeah, so I'm a chief strategist at a company called Liger. Liger is named after the movie Napoleon Dynamite, if there are any fans out there. So it's basically his favorite animal. We merged two businesses together several years ago, a strategy firm and an execution firm, and we needed a cool name because it's a marketing firm. And so we chose Liger, and we lean heavily into it. So we've got a disco ball that we play every time we make a sale, and we've got one conference room named Tater and another called Tots and those types of things. Serial entrepreneur, been in Atlanta my entire career, started off in the technology side of the shop. And I call myself a recovering technologist. So I did that for a while. And then I was in the research space. Marketing nowadays is a combination of technology and research.
I love the Liger. I love mashups in general. Really and truly, their website is a treat. Go check it out. It's actually a fun little read. So that's my tiny plug there.
Thank you. I've done more boring companies. So if you're going to do a marketing company, it better be fun. Right? Like marketing needs to be visceral. It needs to make you have some kind of reaction one way or the other. That's an important aspect of it.
Now, in my experience working with folks that do marketing, it really is the emotional piece is so important and it's frequently underrated. So obviously you touched on this a little bit. What would you say is unusual about what you're up to here at Liger?
So people talk about B2C, so business to consumer and business to business. So you'll hear those two terms. And I think those are misused. So a business to consumer is a transactional marketing approach. So I can run a discount. I can give you buy one, get one free, and it's going to convert you over as a customer. And then B2B, which are more relational. And so those are long term. There's more risk involved if you make that decision. We live in the B2B or relational side of marketing. So we like complex problems that, someone's not just going to see an ad and be like, oh, it's 50% off today, so I'm going to buy it. Typically, touch points on the clients that we're working with is somewhere around 21 before someone's ready to actually talk to a salesperson. And then it may be 5 to 7 touch points after that to convert them. So we live in what I consider a very interesting space. I get to learn about all kinds of things that some are more boring, like we do things like insurance and financial services and fintech, but we also work with like a senior moving company. They move seniors when they're ready to downsize. And so and these are riskier decisions. It's not a decision that you're just going to make as like buying a shirt at a store. Right. So that's our.
It's one of the things I love about consulting is that I get to bring the same set of competencies to different industries. So I get, for me, the two places that I love the most, where I'm constantly learning and I can feel a sense of being able to provide a set of skills and services that are genuinely valuable to someone. I like that feeling of competence. So it sounds like it's a similar situation.
Yeah, so I'm really similar to you. I'm old school services guy. I've done services for a very long time. And what I found is it never is about the industry. It's always about the problem that they're trying to solve. And so the problem, if you know how to solve the problem, it doesn't matter what industry you've been in, where you know what to apply, right? And so we'll have clients that are potentially thinking about working with us, and they say, hey, so do you have any experience in our industry? And I'll say, maybe not that much, but we've solved your problem before. And the problem is more important. If I understand the problem, then I know what tools to apply. Just because I'm in your industry and doesn't mean that I do know how to solve the problem. They're not, it doesn't work that way. So thinking of it as a true consultant, like if it were my business and it were my money, what would I do? What would I apply that I've done before is the right optic to look at when you're thinking about those things.
That makes sense. Something you said is that most brands have a self-awareness problem. And I sort of love that. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, almost every brand has a self-awareness problem. So what's so much fun and what we do is we do this initial discovery process. And so we want to understand the brand and understand where the brand authentically stands. And so often brands want to be something that they're not. And the smaller brands tend to make more mistakes than the larger brands, which is interesting because a larger brand can afford to make a mistake. They have the money. Like I can make a mistake. I've got billions of dollars I'm spending on marketing and one ad's bad or whatever, then I can afford it. Smaller brands change things out all the time. They're not aware of who they are. They try to be something that they're not. They try to change their colors out when they haven't had them out in market long enough. So like really understanding where you sit in the world and owning it. We're working with a company right now that has a Times New Roman brand thing, and it's not what we would do if we were building the brand today. And so we're building a set of ads for them, and they were like, should we use this? And I'm like, that's your brand. You absolutely have it. You can't avoid it. So embrace it and be aware of what you really bring to the world, because that's what's attracting the customers that you have. Now, if that's not the customer base that you want, it's time to put like hard look in the mirror, understand that if you do make those changes, the customer base that's there today, then maybe paying your bills, it may not be there in 12 to 18 months as you make this transition, but you got to fully own it. You cannot be tepid. Marketing is not about being tepid. It is about visceral. Make me angry, make me cry, make me happy, make me sad, something. Yeah. Make me feel something and consistently know. One great example is, Target, Old Navy, Apple, and like Williams Sonoma all use white as a brand color. You and I both can tell what commercial is about to come on when the white comes up on the screen, because it's just a different way that they present it. There's all that subliminal, like blink stuff that Malcolm Gladwell talks about that's so very important to understanding who you are as a brand and where you fit in the world.
Well, and that personality piece, I work with a lot of very small companies and entrepreneurs, like solopreneurs and creative entrepreneurs. And I feel like what you're talking about is something that, to a certain extent, they both yearn for and fear. They recognize that they want to kind of be themselves, right? That's why they start a company. And there's a lot of messaging that says try to fit in, or they believe that's what they're hearing. And I'm just like, you can't compete with people that are spending $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. Don't even try. That's way above your weight class. Be yourself as much as possible within your brand persona. And that's going to get you the better chance to cut through the noise, because it's going to be a little distinct. It's obviously a lot of caveats that I think you would finesse differently, but I feel like it relieves them almost. Like I don't have to try and fit myself into a box. I just have to be more in the place that I am and communicate that better.
Communicate it and fully own it. It's okay. A true entrepreneur is if you say you want a problem solved and you tell me you have money, I'm like, oh, well, I can solve that for you, right? And so you do that over and over again. And at some point you dilute what you really do. And so you have to start then kind of willowing it down to the things that you do really well, that you're really known for. And so the smaller you are, the more you're kind of out on your own, the more you're trying to establish that name for yourself, the more likely you are to take deals that maybe you shouldn't. And so really owning that channel, being true to it, there's only one you, everybody else is taken. So just own it and lean into it. You're going to attract the right kind of clients, customers, things like that. And you and I both have been in situations where you try too hard to sign that client or customer, and then you regret it. You're glad when they leave. And so we do it because it's a survival thing, right? Like, if I could just bring this one other one in, but what have you done? Have you basically taken away time and energy from a client that maybe next that would be a much better fit? So it is hard to say no and to be selective based on who you are and where you fit. But that's what's fun about it. Like it's a continued self-awareness on where you really should be from a brand and personality perspective.
Yeah. So what would you say success looks like for you or your company, however you want to talk about that?
I think that's interesting. It is two different things. And so one is, our our tagline is be known. So we work with typically like the third or fourth tier company in a category. So they're not number one. They want to be number one. And so we need to do some things. They may not be spending the same amount of dollars that company is. So it's kind of a David versus Goliath situation. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same spend. They have to be creative, whatever. So the company lives in that space. And we love to work with companies that want a long-term relationship. They don't see marketing as emergency, all those kind of things. So these are like ways we identify that ideal client. So that is the company. I have a very terrible case of ADD. And so I want the next new thing to happen tomorrow. And I love to learn something new and do something new. And so I do serve as a visionary for the company, but I have to be careful that my visionary doesn't impact what the company is trying to accomplish. Those are two totally different things. So how do I satiate my desire for the next new, cool, shiny object that I want to kind of play with and think about? And when do I introduce that into the Liger ecosystem in such a way that it's going to be meaningful to the portfolio of clients that we're servicing?
Do you have process that you follow with your partners, or is it more at this point sort of relational? You guys kind of like an old married couple, when you're getting that look, you're like, never mind.
Yeah, we follow a thing internally called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and based on the book Traction, and that does assist us with some guardrails. So I sit in the visionary seat and I have an integrator who helps make sure that the crazy ideas I'm coming up with are going to work and not be too impactful to the business. So whatever you have, you need to have some way to filter, and you want the great big ideas, right? Mm-hmm. But then how do you filter them through some type of lens to make sure it's not going to be disruptive to the rest of the work that you're doing? And that does impact brand, right? Like if we're continually changing, well, then who are we? Right. And so grafting something in and making it meaningful to what the company's doing or where the company's going is just as important as thinking about the shiny new object or the new way to approach it.
So for you, like you are a serial entrepreneur and you get excited about new things. And there's lots of folks in the world who have both of those attributes. And in addition to those attributes, there's something in you that said, I'm going to take all of these things I know and I've learned and experienced, and I'm going to turn them into an action. And I find that to be an interesting story. Like, where did that action come from for you? Was it a moment? Was it a history? Like you went from serial entrepreneur to this. Is this one of the stops on your path? Or do you feel like this is your home now?
I'm probably in my fourth career. So very early in my life. So my joke I tell people is when I was 5 years old, I either wanted to be president of the United States or I wanted to work for IBM. Because I'm in Atlanta, and Atlanta IBM was the company to work for. And so at the age of 18, I was working for IBM. I basically worked everything out such that I was at a college that had a good relationship with IBM and they had a co-op program. So I ended up at IBM and realized that it was kind of boring. It was like, this 9-to-5 job. And I didn't know that I liked all the politics and things and whatever. And so I ended up getting into a startup that had been started by a bunch of ex-IBMers. And then I was like, I'm home. This is amazing, right? There are 40 people in this company. 30 of them had come from IBM, 10 were sort of more that way. Met a serial entrepreneur there. And I really liked the lack of politics and the ability to kind of build my own thing. And from there, I became unemployable. So I've really never had like a job since then because no one knows how to hire me, but I'm really glad to come to work with you on a problem and look at a thing. So, I am built for action, and I get up in the morning and think about a thing. And it's like, well, how can we make this happen? Right? Like if it's a present future thinker. So what can we do today to get to the future we're looking for tomorrow? You run into a lot of people who call themselves entrepreneurs who are really just future thinkers. So they like to think about things that could happen, but if you don't put any action behind it, it's just hallucination. Yeah. So, and dreamers are great. Dreamers, we need those people, but that may not be a job.
Yeah. Right? A goal without a plan is a wish.
100%. So like, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? And know that most of the time when you come up with that idea, specifically when you start to build a team around you, they are going to look at you like you are a crazy, crazy person. Mm. And you just have to deal with the fact that that's what you're there to do. You're there to push the envelope and help people move forward. And I don't accept why we can't do something. I want to know how we can.
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe it's still not going to work, but give me like 3 ways we could do it.
Do you know where that started for you? Like, what is it? I met people who have that instinct. There's still the moment of action to go from, I don't know, believing in themselves or taking the risk, whatever it is. There's a emotional barrier for a lot of folks. Do you know if you face that, how you faced it, or if you understand what I'm saying?
I really understand what you're saying. So back in the day, I've typically run companies kind of as the inside person. So you didn't know that I existed. And so I would run the company. And then in 2008, 2009, when social media came out and whatever, those of us that were kind of hiding in the back had to start showing ourselves to the world, right? And so that made me really nervous. And so I joined Toastmasters to learn how to speak. And then I started a podcast. And I did the podcast because I was like, and then they were only audio. So it wasn't video like you and I are doing this today. And it was really safe. I could interview somebody, and if I didn't like the interview, I could throw it away, and it never happened. And because I've always been fascinated about people starting businesses, that's what my interviews were about. So I was like, why'd you start a business? Like, what'd you learn? Whatever. And what were your barriers? And I expected people to tell me it was they didn't have enough money, they didn't get the resources, their family didn't support them or whatever. And what I found out is the most successful entrepreneurs typically have something in their past that they are trying to either prove someone wrong, like they've got some kind of key element that's driving them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the majority. There are a category, I call them rectifies versus magnifies. So they're rectify entrepreneurs. So they're rectifying something from their past. Someone told them they would be good enough. They'd never go to college. They'd never make enough money. They'd be the whatever. And then you have magnifies, and magnifies are about 20% of the population. And those are people who were told, you're amazing and you can do anything. And they have this like drive against that. Steve Jobs, very famous, of course, from an entrepreneurial perspective, was adopted. And when he was around 8 years old, he went to his parents and he told his parents, Mom and Dad, I was adopted. Someone didn't want me. And if his parents had left it at that, he still would have been amazing, but he would have been a rectify entrepreneur. What his parents said to him is, oh, no, Steve, you don't understand. We chose you. And so he lived the rest of his life as the chosen one. Mm-hmm. He ended up building this big, huge business. So regrettably, there's not this huge separation between nature and nurture. Everybody believes there is, and there isn't. You can go back and look at every entrepreneur and you can pick a point or a time or something in their lives, typically early. It can happen later. Let's say there's a tragic event that causes them to go down this path of it's going to be my way or the highway from now on. And you have to be careful not to get too caught up into that because it can hold you back from building the most successful business.
Mm-hmm. So which one are you, rectify or magnify? Yeah.
100% a rectify. 100% a rectify. And I have to think about it every day because I don't want to build a business that isn't for me. It's a business to prove someone else wrong.
Yeah.
And so how do you balance that, right? Like, are you doing this for yourself? Like, do you get up every morning and do the thing and fight the fight? Or do you do it because of that voice in your head that tells you you'll never be good enough, you'll never make it, you'll never amount to anything, right? Mm-hmm. Or do you get up in the morning and do it because it's something you enjoy and something that, and so you have to keep those separate. And businesses get held back by their rectify founders because the rectifies are all caught up in it. And they don't typically, that's talking about brand aware. The most dangerous person in a business is a unaware leader, a leader who doesn't understand kind of what's driving them, why they make the decisions they do, and they haven't sort of come to terms with it.
Are you comfortable sharing some aspect of what you're rectifying?
Oh, I was the like runt on the neighborhood in the, the schoolyard and, had other kind of limiting things when I was growing up. And I didn't, you can either be a victim or a survivor. And so you come out of that as a survivor and you're like, screw you, I'll show you. Mm-hmm. And so then you start to think about how you build off of that. And it's not necessarily the healthiest place, but it certainly is fuel. It certainly is fuel to get up every morning and like lean into it. Yeah. And I'll talk to people who want to be entrepreneurs and they grew up in a great childhood, they had friends, they did the whole thing, whatever. And I'm like, just get a job. Like, you've got hobbies on the weekend, you'll be fine, right? Like, that's great. You should do that. Not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur. It's just not the case. And in today's world, when I first started as an entrepreneur, it meant I was unemployed and, whatever. Because I don't know, age wise, like the Big Chill, when it came out, the guy says he's an entrepreneur and his friends all say, oh, that means you don't have a job. Right.
Yes.
And, you've got, oh, Shark Tank and all these other things. And so entrepreneurs are rock stars.
That's right.
That's not it. It's not it. So, yeah.
I started in the social justice nonprofit world. And for me, it was always interesting to see how many people wanted to come in and hold a rally and how few people wanted to come in and file. And I'm like, yeah, no, we need all of it, by the way. Everybody likes to be the rock star leading the charge. And I'm just like, but what gets you is if you haven't filed your paperwork, dear. That's what needs to happen. And you don't actually have to be the one that does it, but you have to understand that it's an important part of this. I think that especially with, like you said, there's a lot of entrepreneurial entertainment almost. And I do love it. I love that people are seeing their other options and ways. And the grind, I don't think it's the point, but there are times when you really have to put your head down and focus on things that aren't your favorite, because it's just part of what has to be done to make the rest of it work. And that I think it's when you can really see that as just part of the process, not something you resist necessarily or even embrace, but you just recognize, if I want to get to this future, these are the actions I have to take today, and I'm going to do it because it's meaningful to me in one way or another.
I love the term entrepreneurial entertainment. That's really what it is. So like Shark Tank, one of the things that it does that's a misjustice to people is investors actually don't want to invest in your business. No one is fighting to invest. Like they're trying to tell themselves no every time you talk to them. And so Shark Tank has these people fighting over whether or not they're going to invest. That's just not how it works, right? And then the importance of the grind. The first 3 years of a business are just like having a baby. For the first 3 years, you don't sleep. You don't it's 120 hours a week and it's thankless and everyone's telling you to stop, right? And so you have to get past that first. And once you get past 3 years, if it's still like that, there's something fundamentally broken in your business and you need to solve for that. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's the mental perspective that the founder has or the entrepreneur has, is they feel this sense of they're not allowed to rest. So sometimes there's a little bit of a mindset, and then sometimes it is the product or some other fundamental aspect of logistics and systems, right?
And one other point too, the entrepreneur who loves part of the work and they refuse to give it up. So they're
yes.
And then they're like, oh yeah, but no one else could do that. I'm like, well, somebody else could. It might be different. You just love doing it. So are you creating a job for yourself or are you creating a company? Which one are you doing?
Right. And clarity is really important. It's wherever you want to go, you first have to be clear about what's happening, what you actually want to do. Because if you pretend you want a company, but what you really want is a job, that's where the conflict's going to come in. It's fine if you want to have a job, but then let somebody else be managing the company. Don't do that to yourself and everybody else. It's not helpful. I worked with a coach a while back who said, as a leader and entrepreneur, you have to start with the things only you can do. And then she said something incredibly profound, which I don't know if there's a gender piece to it, but I know that for women in leadership, this is really important. She said, your health is the thing. You're the only one who can handle your health. You're the only one who can make sure you're working out, that you're getting rest, and that you're eating. And those are actually the non-negotiables for you. Literally anything else you can have someone else work on. And I was like, oh, wow, what a profound perspective shift to take on.
Yeah, that is a great way to look at it.
One of the things that you talked about, and I love this because I've seen this myself, and I'm just curious. It's always interesting to me when people that work with larger companies have similar experiences, which is clients often ask for things, and it's not always what they need. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Clients almost always ask for things, and it's not what they need. So they've heard some buzzword, specifically like the fact that we're in marketing. Like, I went to a conference, and they're doing this, and it's like, but like, why, right? So at the end of the day, what is it you want? Well, you probably want more money from revenue or customers or whatever. What you've described as a tactic, you've told us you want a social media campaign or an influencer, or you're going to get up on TikTok or whatever. And that may not be the right thing. So getting people to understand, and we do a thing called a ROAR analysis because we're Liger. What's your reality? what are your opportunities in the next 6 to 12 months, aspirations in 12 to 24 months, and what do the results look like? And so when we get that and we line it up and we do things, it's not just business. It could be like, we want to be considered a best place to work. We want this many locations, whatever those things are, awards, access, things like that. That should drive the tactics that we put on top of it. Mm-hmm. So often comes just like, we need an SEO and we need a website, we need a whatever. And it's like, do you need those things? Is that what's really going to get you there? Or are there other ways that we could get around there? And, I talked earlier about how we typically work with maybe the third or fourth person in the category. And so they don't have as much money. They have to do things that are more guerrilla marketing. So what are we going to spend the best first use of those dollars against to make sure we're going to hit their objectives?
Mm-hmm. I love the tagline of "Be Known," because there's with the quote of, don't worry what your customers are thinking about you. Worry that they're thinking about you at all. It's kind of freeing. Like, nobody's thinking about me. If I make a mistake on the quote box I put out, it's not like anybody's really going to care except for me. And I kind of want people to think about me when they're looking for the type of work that I do. So "Be Known" it's a great way to summarize that.
Yeah. And we apply it not only to the businesses, but also the company, the individuals we work with within the company. We want them to be known within the company that they've been successful, that they've done there. So Liger is a supporting brand. It's always in the background, kind of assisting people with, Ligers are mythical creatures, right? So fitting into our kind of goal of where we are, we're there to support and make sure that our clients are successful and that their businesses are successful.
That's awesome. Can you, without obviously disclosing anything confidential, can you tell me the story of one of the more interesting problems you've solved?
Yeah, I think every problem we work on is interesting, even though it's in uninteresting spaces sometimes. So like insurance and financial services and things like that. We typically are brought into companies that are in the middle of doing a lot of, like, they may be merging with other businesses. And so how do you get people, like one example is a company, they were bringing together 17 different companies and they had to come up with one brand. So I was in the room with 10 gentlemen, because it's insurance, who had all chosen their brands on their own. And we had to get them to the point of choosing one name and one logo.
Wow.
And so how do you maneuver that? And there's as much emotional into that as there is like just common sense. There was one logo they didn't choose, but they kept talking about it. They're like, well, why is the logo like that? And why does it look like this? And they didn't want to choose it because it was so odd. And I was like, that's the logo you should choose. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because you keep talking about it. Like, if you're going to talk about it, everybody else is going to talk about it. We want a logo people are going to talk about. So they didn't choose it. They should have, because it was like the one that they kept going back to and saying something about, and paying attention to that, at least through what we do, of like, what do people keep going back to? Does it make them feel a little awkward? Does it, not seem exactly right? Because that's what you're looking for, is human interruption. You want to interrupt the human mind. And so, I've done so many interesting, like I had the research company for 10 years and we did like 300 projects a year, and they were on the things from like office furniture to, I've ridden tractors. I've looked at why people chew gum and what social media profile they have based on the kind of gum they chew. And there is a correlation between them. So stuff like that is fascinating. And what's most fascinating is people are interesting and we all think we're so different, but really we're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of patterns that kind of overlap and map. It just depends on what context you're in as to which patterns matter.
Where's a place that you saw that you, like, really intrigued you or surprised you? That similarity, not different.
So that is probably talking about the chewing gum study was an interesting one, because we were working with a very large brand to determine if there was a type of chewing gum people chewed based on their social media profile. And we did 120 interviews for that project and talked to people about chewing gum and social media habits and whatever. And then you would find like people that showed up one way in social media and another. And there's one in particular group, and we've all seen this when you're on Facebook, there's that older person who continues to share things and you're like, good grief, why do they keep sharing, right? They're not sharing because they really want you to know everything they're doing. what they're trying to get back to is that time when people used to get together for like Sunday dinner and they used to spend time together. And so they want to connect with you. So it's really not about them, it's about you, but it looks like it's about them. So that person who's like putting out information all the time, you're like, good grief, there's John or Sally, and they're putting stuff out on social media again, and they just want to overshare. They'd actually like to hear from you. They're looking for, they wish you'd come to dinner.
Yeah. I often, it's a little bit of a deviation, but for me, I love tech and I love gadgets and all of that. And I also actually like interacting with people. And I find that when I position myself around in technology, my social media as a pathway towards actual in-person interaction, that it's really quite satisfying. And I have a lot of engagement and joy. But when I stop there, it's like eating candy for dinner. It tastes good in the moment, but then I need to eat more and more and more, as opposed to putting it down and saying, oh, let's go have a phone call with someone or go for a walk.
Humans are social creatures. And
yes, we are.
I think with the way some of the things are happening with AI and otherwise, it brings us back to this and the pandemic, a longing for experience, being together, noticing here in Atlanta in particular, there are all these like work, live, play communities, and they're just bustling every Friday and Saturday night with people out doing things, living life together. So the pendulum's swinging a little bit further back to that experience. There was this book back in the day, and I don't remember the book, but it talked about how eventually we were all going to be marshmallow looking people who lived in our basements and just interacted with each other over our computers. And really technology should disappear, just like electricity or water does in our world. And it should allow us to experience the true things in life. And that's why I love things like AI. I think it's great. It empowers us to not do the mundane tasks that just take time, right? Just take time.
Yeah. It's really about making sure that you're owning your tools and they're not owning you, so that 100%. You can really be in your life. Will you share advice you've received that's influenced the way you approach your work?
I love this question because people ask it to me, and then my answer is all the bosses I had earlier in my career were the ones who did the things that I was like, I'll never do that. So it's more about like an example thing. So that's one kind of thing, is like looking at what other leaders did that I was like, yeah, I'm not going to follow that because it just doesn't work. It doesn't make people feel good, those kind of things. And then the other is I was at one point in my career thought I was very stuck, and I went to a dinner with an advisor mentor. And by the end of that dinner, understood that I really had a lot more power than I thought I did. And we often end up in those situations where we think we're powerless, but actually we have way more power than we want to give ourselves credit for. So, and it may be something you can't observe about yourself. That's why I always have this kind of informal board of advisors around me. So those are people I can go talk with and solution a problem, and they will come up with a new idea or something that I hadn't thought of, right? And so it's really important to get outside your head and let someone else kind of speak into you and to listen to them when they say those things so that you can get yourself unstuck.
Yeah. I find that to be equally powerful, to recognize that it's like rear view mirrors, like no matter how aware I am, I still have people around me that I respect and trust who can talk to me and give me good advice or good guidance or important feedback, say the things I don't want to hear. So that feels super wise. What do you do to keep yourself recharged or inspired?
I like to drive. So I'm mostly a workaholic. I like to work. It's kind of like there's no separation between the two. But when I need to really think through and consider something, that's going to be going out for a drive. So there's get in the car. I've got a convertible, pop the top, go for a ride. Can make me think. And it's a great way because you can't be distracted by social media. You can't whatever. So you put some music on and it allows you like space to think.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that you said when we started that I've been sort of a little bit reflecting on in the back of my head is you talked about B2B being relational, which so agree with that. And I also feel like in the B2C world, people are sort of yearning for a little more connection between social media. We're very engaged, but we're not connected. And just like people are highly isolated. I mean, they've done a lot of studies on the rise of suicide in children. Like it's dark and painful. And I don't think that consumerism is a replacement for it, but I do feel like there's a lot of smaller businesses that are seeing and understanding that there's a desire for more relationship and engagement. Do you see that as an effective, because it's hard because you can't really scale that in a certain way. Like that's part of why some things kind of feel weird and salesy, because they're trying to scale connection, and it's actually really something that just takes time and paying attention. But I'm curious if you've seen anything that bridges that, or if you agree, given that I have a smaller sample size, I think probably than you do.
So there's a book that came out years ago called Fourth Turning. And it talks about life kind of flows in seasons. And so you've got a spring, summer, fall, and winter of everything. And I believe we're in a fourth turning right now. So if you think about the Industrial Revolution and some of the things that have happened, internet, those types of things, and what it is, it does create a return to village. And return to village is back in the day, I had the places that I would go to get the things that I wanted. And I pay attention to that in my life right now, like the products that come to my house. Like I've typically found someone online that I really like their product, and then they send it to me. Like I'm not necessarily going out to the store. So those products have an opportunity to create village with me, right? Like there's a reason I'm buying, a reason I'm thinking about it. When I do go to any of these locations, I'm looking for like, oh, I love that little store that's got this whole proprietor that you can get to know. So that is a very real thing. And there are companies that do that on scale that still feel small. So like Jerry's has always done a great job of still feeling like the local hometown whatever thing, even though they're a big brand. So there are some nods you can take from franchise models and things like that you can then incorporate into your own business that has that bespoke feel to it, that built for me kind of concept. And we talked about like the internet and some of those being able to give us that one-to-one relation. Oh, I can build you your thing. AI really does allow us to build things for people that are just really custom. I found a shirt company yesterday, and they don't make the shirt until you buy the shirt. So they're like into that. You know, most companies go buy a bunch of shirts and they put them on the shelf and then they try to sell them. They're like, no, we're trying to be environmentally friendly. We're going to build it custom to your specs. It's still not that expensive. It's not an expensive shirt. Like you don't get it for 2 weeks, because when you order it, that's when they make the shirt and then they send it to you. So little things like that make it feel like yours and custom and village. And like when you used to go down to the tannery and get them to make your belt or whatever, those are some things that you can lean into as a company and you can scale those. Those are still scalable. It's about kind of building into the ethos of your brand.
Thank you. For folks that are listening and want to know more or how do they pay attention to what Liger is up to?
Yeah, so you can find my number one platform right now is LinkedIn. So back in the day, it was Twitter X. I was big there, but not anymore. LinkedIn, that's where you're going to me. And then I do have a podcast called The Claw. And so it's a podcast about marketing. So I primarily talk about marketing and marketing tactics and techniques that work and things like that. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was a great conversation.
And bye, everybody. See you next week. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. Well, we love our guests. Appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.